You probably know Margaret Atwood as, well, the author of The Handmaid's Tale.
Right. I mean, that iconic red cloak and the white bonnet.
Exactly. They're practically burned into our collective cultural retinas at this point.
Oh, totally.
But did you know she also holds actual literal tech patents for remote robotic writing technology?
Or that she wrote a superhero comic book about a mutant catbird.
Right. What about the fact that she penned a secret novel that no human being is allowed to read until the year 2114?
Yeah, just sitting locked away in a vault in Norway right now.
Just slumbering. So you have this stack of seemingly random puzzle pieces, right? A wilderness survivor, a robotics inventor, an accused witch's descendant.
It's a lot to process.
It is. And today we are putting those pieces together. We're taking our stack of sources on this Canadian literary giant and really diving into it. Our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how Margaret Atwood built a career out of perfectly predicting the terrifying futures we are, currently building for ourselves.
Yeah, and to get there, you really have to discard that stereotypical image of the quiet novelist sitting in a dusty study somewhere.
Right.
Atwood operates almost entirely outside traditional categories. She's this intellectual force who actively resists being boxed into like any single genre or political camp or even timeline.
I want to start with the origin of that independence, actually, because to understand how she so clearly envisions the collapse of modern society, you really have to look at how she grew up completely isolated from it.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about a childhood that sounds like it belongs in a totally different century.
It really does. And it's basically the blueprint for everything she eventually wrote. So she was born in Ottawa in 1939, but her father was a forest entomologist.
Wait, so he studied bugs.
Exactly, bugs in the forest. And because of his field research, she spent the majority of her early childhood deep in the remote backwoods of northern Quebec. And we aren't talking about like a cute cabin near a town. We're talking about true isolation in the dense Canadian bush, far, far away from the comforts of any modern infrastructure.
Yeah, looking at the sources, she didn't even attend school full-time until she was 12 years old.
12.
I mean, I kept thinking about this while preparing for today. It's almost like she was raised on a different planet. Or like she's this alien anthropologist who just got dropped into modern society right at the onset of puberty.
That's a great way to put it.
Because she wasn't socialized normally during those, really formative years, she looks at human societal rules, not as given truths, but as bizarre, arbitrary, and honestly incredibly fragile constructs.
That alien anthropologist perspective is just crucial here. Instead of regular playground socialization, playing tag or whatever, she became this voracious reader of Grimm's fairy tales, comic books, Dell pocketbook mysteries.
Just reading about murder in the woods.
Exactly. She was reading these dark stories of survival and murder while completely surrounded by the raw, untamed wilderness. And that extreme immersion, it just stripped away any illusion of human safety.
Right.
It taught her from day one that the world is fundamentally a predator-prey environment. I mean, nature does not care about your societal rules.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't care about your moral compass. Nature is an active force that will absolutely consume you if you aren't paying attention.
Which she actually formalized later in her career. That background seems to be the entire basis for her landmark 1972 nonfiction book, Survival.
It is, yeah. In Survival, she put forward this highly influential thesis that Canadian literature, and really by extension the Canadian identity itself, is defined by this omnipresent symbol of survival.
Right, just making it through the winter.
Yeah, she argued that there's a pervasive victor and victim relationship running through the culture, and it's driven largely by a deep-seated fear of nature.
Which is so different from the American view.
Exactly. Unlike some romanticized American literature where the frontier is, something to be conquered and tamed, her view of the Canadian wilderness is that it's just something you simply try to survive without it killing you.
So because she views the world through that specific lens of actual physical survival against real threats, she gets incredibly defensive about how her work is categorized.
Oh, fiercely defensive.
Like she violently rejects the label of science fiction for her most famous dystopian books.
She is famously specific about this distinction. For Atwood, science fiction is, in her own words, talking squids in outer space.
Which is such a funny phrase. But I have to push back on this a little bit for you listening, because I read through these notes and thought, come on, is she just engaging in literary snobbery here?
It sounds like it at first glance.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
why is she so resistant to the sci-fi label when she's clearly writing apocalyptic stories about the future? I mean, look at her Mad Adam trilogy.
Oh, Oryx and Crake and all that.
Yeah. She has genetic modifications running wild in those books. There are pigoons, which are pigs bred with human brain tissue,
Terrifying.
and racunks, like a raccoon-skunk hybrid. There are wolvogs that look like cute dogs but will literally tear your throat out.
Yeah.
I mean, how is a human-pig hybrid not science fiction?
Well, it definitely sounds like it, and it's a debate she's had extensively. The most notable one was a fascinating discussion back in 2011 with the legendary science fiction author Ursula K. Le Guin.
Oh, wow, to be a fly on the wall for that.
Right. And Le Guin argued that Atwood was absolutely writing science fiction, but Atwood clarified that what Le Guin calls science fiction, Atwood calls speculative fiction.
Speculative fiction.
Yeah. For Atwood, speculative fiction means things that could really happen. It employs means that are already at hand and takes place entirely on planet Earth. So the distinction isn't about snobbery at all. It's fundamentally about the source of the terror.
Okay, so it's about the mechanism of the fear, not just the setting.
Precisely. She operates on a strict golden rule. She famously applied this to the writing of The Handmaid's Tale.
Right?
She says she never puts anything in her books that somebody, somewhere in human history, hasn't already done, or that we don't already have the technological capacity to do today.
That is chilling.
It really is. If she uses talking squids in outer space, you, the reader, can just brush the story off as escapist fantasy. You can close the book, put it on your nightstand, and feel totally safe.
Because squids don't talk.
Right. But if she uses real historical precedents, if she demonstrates that humanity has already committed these atrocities under different regimes, you are forced to face the reality of what we're capable of.
It's almost like she is engaging in a literary form of, like, stress testing.
Oh, I like that.
You know how engineers will take a piece of metal and bend it until it snaps just to find its breaking point?
Yeah.
Atwood is doing the exact same thing with societal norms. She takes a current political policy or a technological trend, bends it to its absolute logical extreme using only real historical precedents, and shows us exactly where our society will snap.
That is the perfect way to describe her process. She isn't inventing horrors out of thin air. She is just reorganizing them into our near future.
And because she strictly limits herself to what humans are already capable of, her fiction functions as a literal economic indicator.
Yes.
We can actually track public anxiety by looking at the sales data of her books.
It's wild to look at the numbers.
It is. When we look at the data, The Handmaid's Tale and its 2019 Booker Prize-winning sequel, The Testaments, saw massive rapid sales spikes immediately following the shifts in power during both the 2016 and the 2024 United States presidential elections.
Right.
And I want to pause here really quickly just to be absolutely clear to you listening. We are not taking a political side regarding these elections.
We're totally neutral on this.
Exactly. We aren't endorsing any viewpoint here. We're simply looking at the data and observing how the public reacts to societal anxiety by buying Atwood's books. It's purely a cultural and economic phenomenon.
And what's fascinating is how those book sales act as a completely nonpartisan anxiety barometer. Regardless of your political leaning, the data just shows a massive cultural reflex.
Yeah.
Following the 2024 election, The Handmaid's Tale shot up to third on Amazon's bestseller list. The public essentially uses her speculative fiction to process their real-world apprehension. Atwood herself even responded to that specific cultural moment in 2024 by posting on X, "Despair is not an option, it helps no one."
Wow. And we see that cultural reflex going in the opposite direction, too,
Yeah.
with institutions basically trying to suppress her stress tests.
Oh, definitely.
Like in 2024, the Utah public school system instituted a book ban under new state law. And right there, on their initial list of objectionable books, was Atwood's Oryx and Crake. She manages to strike such a nerve that her work is simultaneously pushed to the top of bestseller lists and pulled from library shelves in the exact same year.
It really just proves that her method of relying on historical precedent makes the work undeniably potent. But, she doesn't limit her stress testing just to fiction.
Right.
She actively participates in building the technological future she writes about. Which brings us back to the patents you mentioned at the start of our deep dive.
Yeah, I kept staring at this part of our sources. Because we're talking about a woman in her 60s at the time, famous for writing about how unchecked corporate technology basically enslaves humanity,
Yeah.
deciding to jump headfirst into robotics and cloud tech. It feels entirely contradictory.
It totally seems that way until you look at the actual logistical problem she was trying to solve.
Okay, what was it?
So in early 2004, she was on this grueling book tour in Denver for Oryx and Crake. And she realized the physical demands of flying across the world just to sign pieces of paper were completely unsustainable.
I mean, book tours are exhausting.
Right, so she conceived the concept of a remote robotic writing technology. She wanted to be able to sit in her living room in Toronto, sign a screen, and have a robotic arm physically write that signature in real ink on a book in Tokyo in real time.
But she didn't just have the idea and hand it off to some engineering firm, did she?
No, she founded the
That's
company.
amazing.
Originally called Unnotchet Inc., they produced a device known as the Long Pen, and she had to actively participate in figuring out how to translate the physical pressure and the kinetic energy of a human hand across an ocean so the ink wouldn't blotch or skip on the page.
Oh.
She applied the exact same rigorous mechanical logic she uses to build dystopian worlds to solving latency issues in robotic arms.
That transition from speculative fiction author to tech CEO is just astonishing. And the technology didn't just stay a novelty for book tours, right?
No, it evolved significantly. The company eventually renamed itself Singerfay Inc., and they shifted away from book tours into high-level business and legal transactions, offering secure, cloud-based electronic signature technology. Yeah. As of our source data, Atwood remains a director and continues to hold various patents related to this technology.
She is navigating the bleeding edge of modern corporate tech while simultaneously looking way, way down the timeline of human civilization.
Exactly.
I mean, if the long pen is her dealing with the present, the future library project is her communicating with a world she will never even see.
The Future Library is arguably one of the most profound poetic projects she has ever participated in.
It's so cool.
It really is. It's a public art project based in Norway where one writer a year contributes a manuscript that will be held in trust, completely unread, for a century.
100 years.
Yeah. The organizers even planted a specialized forest of trees that will eventually be cut down in 100 years to print the anthologies.
That's incredible.
And Atwood was selected as the very first contributor. In 2015, she handed over a manuscript called Scribbler Moon.
Meaning no one is allowed to read it, review it, or publish it until the year 2114.
Exactly. She likened the entire concept to a fairy tale, telling a guardian that it is like Sleeping Beauty. The texts are going to slumber for 100 years, and then they will wake up and come to life again.
Wow.
She even joked that readers in 2114 might need a paleoanthropologist to translate some of the obsolete cultural references in her story.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
But when you look at her overarching career, what does a project like that signify? We have this globally recognized expert on dystopia, someone who makes her living warning us about our darkest impulses, leaving a manuscript for a civilization 100 years from now.
Well, it encapsulates a vital, often overlooked aspect of her ethos, which is her fundamental optimism.
Optimism, really?
Yes. Think about it. She writes incredibly bleak, cautionary tales where society collapses. But to write a book for the year 2114 requires a baseline belief that humanity will actually survive to see the year 2114.
Oh, that's a great point.
Despite the horrors she catalogs in her speculative fiction, she believes there will be a future and there will be people in it who still have the capacity to care about stories. She genuinely trusts in human endurance.
She refuses to be constrained by our current timeline, just as she refuses to be boxed in by the boundaries of literary genres.
Exactly.
And as we dig deeper into the sources, you see that she staunchly refuses to be boxed in by political or social labels either, even when her own readers desperately try to make her a figurehead for their movements.
Oh, her relationship with ideological labels is incredibly complex, particularly when it comes to feminism.
Right.
Despite writing The Handmaid's Tale, which is widely taught and revered as a foundational feminist text, she has frequently balked at the label. She often prefers the term social realism.
Which actually makes perfect sense when you remember her golden rule.
Oh, so?
Well, if she is only writing down what patriarchal societies have actually done to women throughout history, she doesn't view it as feminist theory. She views it as historical reporting.
Right.
But her resistance to adopting ideological labels has gotten her into intense controversies with her own fan base. The 2018 Me Too controversy is a prime example of this. And again, just to be clear, we are neutrally reporting the events from the sources here.
Yes, absolutely. So in 2018, Atwood signed an open letter calling for an independent investigation into a university's handling of the firing of a professor who had been accused of sexual harassment and assault.
Right.
Her signature generated severe social media backlash from some feminist critics who felt she was betraying the Me Too movement by seemingly defending an accused abuser.
And she didn't back down, did she?
No, in response, she wrote an op-ed for the Globe and Mail titled, "Am I a Bad Feminist?" In that op-ed, she defended her position by stating she was strictly supporting due process in the legal system.
She argued that unquestioning condemnation without a fair, transparent institutional process is incredibly dangerous. She even referred to the Me Too movement as a symptom of a broken legal system, suggesting that when institutions fail to provide justice, people resort to internet tribunals, which she views as a dangerous precedent.
And that position angered a lot of her longtime supporters, who felt she was failing to understand the power dynamics at play. But her stance really highlights her absolute refusal to toe any party line, regardless of the social cost.
Wait, this connects directly back to her childhood in the woods, doesn't it?
Oh, how so?
She views the Me Too movement not through a partisan lens, but as the alien anthropologist watching a society bypass its own established legal structures.
Wow. Yes.
To her, a society abandoning due process in favor of public tribunals looks exactly like the breakdown of rules that precedes the dystopias she writes about.
That is a profound connection. She's applying the exact same critical stress testing lens to her allies that she applies to her adversaries.
She demands rigorous critical thinking over mob consensus, even when the mob thinks they're doing the right thing.
Exactly. And it's why she possesses a host of seemingly contradictory labels that just confuse people who try to categorize her.
The list of her self-professed labels is wild.
It really is.
She has called herself a red Tory, which she defines in the historical Canadian sense as someone who believes that society should be structured with order, but that those in power have an absolute paternalistic responsibility to care for the community and the disadvantaged.
Right.
She has stated openly on social media that she is a monarchist.
Yep.
And her dietary restrictions are equally specific. She is a pescatarian who absolutely refuses to eat anything with fur or feathers, but she will gladly eat gastropods, like snails are fine.
Yeah, she draws a very weird, firm, ethical line at eating snails.
It's so specific.
Yeah.
And on top of all this heavy intellectual philosophy, she has this incredible dry sense of humor.
Oh, her humor's fantastic.
In 2024, she just randomly popped up in a cameo on the Canadian procedural television show Murdoch Mysteries. She played an amateur ornithologist looking at birds.
Naturally.
So, as a reader, how do you reconcile this? How does the woman who wrote the ultimate feminist dystopian text also anger modern feminist critics, align with historical red Toryism, invent robotic arms, and joke around on daytime TV?
It only seems contradictory if you expect her to follow a prepackaged ideology. Atwood's core defining characteristic is fiercely independent thought.
Right.
She views unquestioning adherence to any group or the blind acceptance of any dogma as the exact mechanism that creates totalitarianism. To Atwood, the moment you stop questioning your own side's method is the exact moment you start laying the bricks for Gilead.
So to prevent the dystopia, you have to be willing to anger your own allies.
Yes.
You have to maintain that wilderness survival instinct, and you have to be willing to look at the wolves even when they're wearing the sheep's clothing of your own political party.
You have to remain the alien anthropologist at all times. You can never get too comfortable with the societal rules of the present, because they can be rewritten overnight.
Margaret Atwood is an untamable intellectual force. She is a wilderness survivor who views civilization as a thin veneer.
Yay.
She is an inventor solving the mechanical problems of the future, and a writer who uses the darkest parts of human history to build a stress test for our present.
She forces us to look squarely at what we are capable of, denying us the comfort of talking squids in outer space to distract us from our own reflections.
But before we wrap up this deep dive into the source material, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
It is a piece of Atwood's family history that we haven't touched on yet, and it fundamentally recontextualizes everything we've just discussed about her life and her work.
It's one of those historical details that sounds like it must be fiction, but it is entirely real.
According to Atwood's grandmother, their family is directly descended from a woman named Mary Webster.
Merriam-Webster.
Right. Mary Webster was a 17th century Puritan woman living in Massachusetts who was accused of witchcraft. She was subjected to a trial, convicted, and she was actually hanged from a tree and left for dead. But she didn't die.
Unbelievable.
When they came to cut her down the next morning, she was still alive. She survived the hanging, and she lived for another 14 years. Atwood even wrote a poem about her called Half-Hanged Mary. And this is the kicker. She dedicated The Handmaid's Tale to her.
A woman who literally survived the ultimate oppressive, dogmatic system of her time.
Exactly. So I want you to ponder this. How much of Margaret Atwood's lifelong obsession with surviving oppressive systems is just creative brilliance, and how much of it is literally in her blood?
Wow.
An ancestral memory passed down from a woman who simply refused to die at the hands of a fanatic society. When you're the descendant of a woman who beat the hangman's noose, maybe you don't need talking squids to understand terror.
You really don't.
Maybe you just need to look at the world around you, bend it to its breaking point, and write down exactly what happens next. From the backwoods of Quebec to the sealed vaults of the year 2114, the alien anthropologist is always taking notes. Keep that in mind the next time you see a red cloak.